In this episode, we talk about the new COVID-19 variant and how worried you should be about it. We also give you the latest about the 8 ex-Navy men sentenced to death in Qatar. But first, we talk about the plane carrying Indian nationals which was grounded in France. Hi, my name is Rahel Philipose and you are listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express News Show. Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose and you are listening to 3 Things, the Indian Express News Show. Last week, a plane carrying 303 passengers, most of whom were Indians, was grounded for 4 days at the Charleroi airport, located about 130 kilometers away from Paris. The Airbus A340, operated by Romanian carrier Legend Airlines, had taken off from the UAE and was headed to Nicaragua. During a technical stopover at the Vatry airport in France, the flight was grounded after the local administration received an anonymous tip-off about human trafficking. Later, the flight was allowed to take off again, but not to Nicaragua as originally planned. Instead, it was rerouted to India. This week, 276 of the 303 passengers arrived at Mumbai's Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj International Airport. The Indian Express's Pratip Acharya joins us in this segment to talk about why the flight was grounded, the human trafficking allegations, and what happened to the remaining passengers. So to start with, Pratip, can you explain why this plane was initially headed to Nicaragua?
Basically, Nicaragua is one of those countries in Central America and it's towards the south of the United States of America. So these countries like Nicaragua, Guatemala and Panama, so they are like springboards for illegal migration. So people who wants to enter the US or Canada, they land up in these countries with valid visas, tourist visas, then they cross the border illegally to enter the US and Canada. And this whole route has been operational since like several decades now. In India, it's popularly known as donkey route. So, yeah.
Right. And can you explain why this plane headed to Nicaragua was grounded in France? How did these human trafficking allegations first surface?
So, according to the French government statement is they received an anonymous tip-off saying that there are so many people in the flight who are being trafficked. So that was the anonymous tip-off they had received, and following which the entire flight was grounded and an investigation was initiated by the French government.
Right. And what happened after it was grounded? Can you tell us about the investigation that was initiated by the French authorities?
So the French authorities, they had 4 judges were there. Like they were investigating, they were interrogating the passengers, they were recording their statements, they were verifying their documents. 21st or 22nd it started, and there was a seal that was like that. It was like kind of an embargo that was implemented on the flight so that it doesn't take off. And the embargo was lifted on late Sunday on 24th December and the flight was allowed to leave on 25th December. So during this whole process of interrogation, the French government was actually going through the process of, and they had also detained 2 persons during the whole process. But however, they had released them later.
Okay, and once the flight was cleared to take off again, why didn't it just go to Nicaragua as was originally planned?
Yeah, so according to the rules of aviation and everything, so if an international flight is like taking off, for example, if a flight is taking off from Mumbai and it is supposed to reach Dubai or any other country, permission will be needed from Mumbai also that it is leaving its territory, and the permission is required from the destination country also where it is that if it is allowed to enter. So possibly the Nicaraguan authorities, they did not allow them to enter their country. And at the same time, when the French government also approached the UAE government from where the actual flight took off, from Fujairah. So they also did not allowed flight to enter their territory. The only country that extended support was India. So that is why the flight was allowed to, enter the country.
Right. And what happened to the hundreds of passengers on board the flight? Where did they all eventually add up?
So there were 303 passengers who originally boarded the flight from the UAE, out of which 25 of them have sought asylum in France. Like they have under the French Agency for Refugee Protection, there is an act. So under this, they had sought asylum, following which they have been sent to a illegal immigration camp in Zappy, which is in France. Apart from this 25 people, and this 25 people included 5 minors also. So apart from this 25 people, all the rest of them, like they have been allowed to fly back. So which counts to around 276, 275. Yeah. So they had flown back to India.
And what happened once the 275 passengers returned to India? What do we know about what's next for them?
Yeah, so when they came back to India, they had to go through a like 4 5 hours whole grilling process of the authorities, the immigration, the CVI, and everything. Like they had to have their documents verified and everything. So following which, most of them were allowed to go back to their own home states at their own expense for the time being. So, for example, in Gujarat, 21 people have returned, and all of them had been questioned by the CID in Gujarat. So, all of them, like whenever they will return, they will have to go through a process of questioning. They'll have to go through a process of rigorous interrogation.
So now it's been about a week since the flight was grounded in France. Was any concrete evidence of human trafficking found?
See, basically, there are already 25 people or 27. So, Indian government has also said that there are 4 people who are from Nepal. But what is the stand on the government, that is not clear. So, we have to understand there are 25 people who have already sought asylum in their country, which means that people seek an asylum when they have no country. And also at the same time, when Express, we reached out to one of the spokesperson of the Mexican flight carrier, Legend Airlines, who was transporting the passengers. So they had already told that almost all the passengers who were flying, they had valid tickets, valid passports, they had all the valid documents for Nicaragua. But there was no record available on paper if they were illegally entering the US or any other country. And also the spokesperson said that some of them also had return tickets. So there is no thing on paper that can establish the fact that they were going to the US. Of course. But again, the whole aspect of this illegal immigration thing is not to keep any paper trail. So basically, evidence wise, no. But there have been evidence, but there is a clear evidence that they were traveling to Nicaragua. Because that's what even the spokesperson of the aircraft is also saying.
And next we talk about COVID-19. India is once again witnessing a surge in COVID-19 cases, especially with the emergence of the new JN1 variant. At least 150 cases of the new variant have been detected in India so far, with the highest number of cases being reported in Kerala. To find out more about this new variant, the scope of its growth, and what measures are being taken to contain it, my colleague Niharika Nanda speaks to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt in this segment.
So, Anonna, we are hearing about this new COVID-19 subvariant, that is JN.1. What is it exactly and how severe is it?
So JN1 has now been, designated as a variant of interest by the WHO. Variant of interest is any variant of COVID that is leading to, say, a surge in cases, or, it has a competitive advantage over other variants, or it is projected to cause more severe symptoms. In the case of JN1, of course, it's the competitive advantage over the other variants in circulation which led to the designation. So if we look at data from, say, the United States, at the moment, JN1 accounts for about 39 to 50% of the variants in circulation. So, it clearly is circulating more than the variants that were more dominant so far. When it comes to severity of disease, we do not know yet. None of the countries that have started reporting cases of JN1 have said that they are seeing more severe cases, hospitalizations, etc. So we still don't know what the impact of the variant will be.
And how different is this variant from all the other variants and subvariants of COVID-19 that have come up, in the recent past?
So again, JN1 is an Omicron subvariant. It is a descendant of BA2.86, which is commonly referred to as Pirola. And JN1 has only one more mutation on the spike protein as compared to Pirola. However, Pirola, when it is compared to its predecessor, had over 30 mutations in the spike protein. Now, why do scientists look at the spike protein? It's because when it comes to corona, the spike protein is what attaches to the receptors on the human cells and helps the virus get inside the body. So any mutation in the spike protein may result in vaccines becoming ineffective, or the virus being better suited to evade immunity, or tests that depend on testing for these particular parts of the virus failing. However, so far, none of this has happened with JN1, and WHO says that the existing vaccines continue to prevent severe disease and death. We have not seen evidence of more severe disease from other countries with JN1 either.
And Anona, what kind of measures are being taken to contain the growth of the number of cases?
Around 2 weeks back, I think the Union Health Secretary wrote to all the states to increase surveillance and to test more. So after COVID-19 was declared to not be a public health emergency by WHO earlier this year in May, the testing in the country had declined significantly. Even the whole genomic sequencing that we do to track the variants had gone down over the past few months. So when we started seeing an uptick in cases, especially from Kerala, the Union Health Ministry advised all states to ramp up their testing, especially testing using the more accurate RT-PCR, and to send all the positive samples for sequencing to see what variant is causing these cases. And we have seen over 150 cases of JN1 so far, most of them from Kerala, some from Gujarat, some from Karnataka. But the variant is clearly on the rise even in India.
Right. But Anona, tell me this, if the situation becomes more serious and the number of cases increases manifold, is our healthcare system ready to take that kind of a burden?
So the best thing about dealing with COVID for the last 2-3 years has been that the health systems have been scaled up a lot, and now hospitals have an idea of how to manage COVID-19. So basically at a moment's notice, they can scale up the number of beds that are required for treating COVID patients, etc. They're very equipped to do so now after 3 years of pandemic. In fact, the central government hospitals in Delhi, if you see, have already created a separate ward for COVID-19 treatment in case the cases start going up and there is a requirement for hospitalization.
Right. And towards the end, I would like to ask you, what kind of measures can people take to protect themselves from this subvariant of COVID-19?
Since we are seeing an increase in cases, the experts and the doctors have already started saying that we should take precautions. There's no need to panic, but precautions like hand washing and masking up in public will help.
And in the end, we talk about the 8 ex-Navy men sentenced in Qatar. Earlier this year, a court in Qatar had issued death sentences to 8 former personnel of the Indian Navy, a ruling that India had described as deeply shocking. These men were detained back in 2022 in connection with an alleged espionage case. Now, weeks after the Indian government appealed against the death penalty, the appellate court in Qatar has now commuted the death sentence. And while a detailed court order is awaited, the Indian government said that the sentence has been reduced. The Indian ambassador to Qatar and other officials were present in the court of appeal. Alongside the family members, and the Ministry of External Affairs issued a statement saying, "We have stood by them since the beginning of the matter, and we will continue to extend all consular and legal assistance. We will also continue to take up the matter with the Qatari authorities." The ministry also added that due to the confidential and sensitive nature of these proceedings, it would not be appropriate to make any further comment at this point. Sometime back, when we had spoken to Nirupama Subramanian, the former national editor for strategic affairs at the Indian Express, she told us about the naval officers and what had brought them to Qatar.
They are ex-Navy, Indian Navy. And they were working for a company called Dhara Global Technologies and Solutions, which is a service provider to the Qatari Emiri Naval Force. That's the full name for the Qatari Navy. And this company was providing all kinds of services. It was involved in the training of the Qatari Navy. It was involved in maintaining equipment. It was involved in providing logistical services. And the company was very well known in those circles. In fact, one of the people who is in custody, Commander Purnendu Tiwari, he was awarded the Pravasi Bharat Samman award in 2019 for furthering the bilateral relations between India and Qatar because of the role that he was performing as part of this company.
And while they were working for Dhara Global, these men were picked up by Qatari authorities last year in August. And what's important to note is that it is still not known exactly why these men were first detained.
So the charges have not been framed. I mean, in a legal sense, there's no formal charge sheet against them. And the Indian embassy has been telling the families that they have not been informed of the charges. The families are saying that they have also not heard from the Qatari authorities what these men are accused of and why they have been picked up. Let me add that it's not just normal jail. Each of these men has been put in solitary confinement. So from the 30th of August practically till date, they are in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement is very severe punishment. You don't give solitary confinement as a punishment for ordinary offenses. It is usually associated with security offenses. And security offenses meaning, betraying the nation in some way or the other, or espionage, spying. This kind of thing usually attracts solitary confinement. So solitary has triggered the speculation that, and given the kind of work that they were doing, which was with the Qatari Navy, it has triggered speculation that they were involved in some kind of espionage. Now, no one has said that formally. The Indian government definitely has not said that. When this question has come up repeatedly at the weekly briefings of the Ministry of External Affairs. So even if they were involved in a security-related offense, and even if it's a very serious offense for the Qataris to have put them in solitary confinement, espionage goes on all the time and various people are caught, but they're also released.
Nirupama told us what makes this matter complicated is that Qatar, which has friendly ties with India, had not notified India after arresting these individuals.
Because in a country with whom you have friendly relations, this is routine. Somebody gets arrested, especially if it's a security-related offense, they would be informed immediately and they would be told quickly what the charges are. So it's a little puzzling. It took them so long to inform the Indian embassy in Doha that, these men are in their custody. And then it took them a further 2 weeks or so to give them the first round of consular access. So it's a little surprising that this has happened with a friendly country. One can imagine that something like this would happen with Pakistan. Like if they capture somebody who they allege is a spy or for any offense, it is likely that they will not inform the Indians immediately.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. It was written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Shashank Bhargava and Niharika Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.